Welcome back to our series on the history of the mint julep. My name is Brian Cushing. I'm the program director at Historic Locust Grove, and today we have made it to 1862, and we are going to be looking at a source that we've seen on a few other of these videos, Jerry Thomas's Bartender's Guide, his account of the bartender's trade that he wrote down in 1862, and as you can see by all the little notes in there, I really like to explore this one. He wrote down his take on the mint julep. And this is actually going to be 4 juleps in one, because he had his primary recipe and then he had 3 different variations on that, one of which is very similar to what we think of today as a mint julep. There was actually a 5th in there, but it's more of a punch for 5 people than a variation on the mint julep, so maybe we'll get to that one in a future video. Jerry Thomas actually calls for a large bar glass for this recipe, and so we will stick to glass, and we're going to use one of these goblets from, this is probably from around the end of the 19th century. So launching into Jerry Thomas's basic recipe for a mint julep, it starts out pretty easy. We take a tablespoon of sugar, we'll put that in our glass. You're going to take about 2.5 tablespoons of water. You're going to want to keep that room temperature to help dissolve the sugar. You can substitute simple syrup, but I will tell you that you will lose something in the translation. Okay. And so we're going to just give that a quick mix until it's dissolved. And now we're going to do something unlike that we've ever done before. We're going to take about 3 of our mint sprigs. We're going to place them leaves downward into the glass, and we're going to leave the stems on here. And we're going to muddle them a little bit. Jerry wants us to kind of get them to where the essence of the mint is extracted into the water and the sugar. So once you feel like that the sugar and the water have started to kind of absorb that mint flavor, he calls for a 1.5 wineglass of cognac. In 19th century terms, a 1.5 wineglass is 3 ounces. So we're going to take our Hennessy, which we've been using. Easy way to measure 3 ounces. These great little Locust Grove shot glasses that you can get from Jennifer in our museum store are 1.5 ounces. So that's 2 of these shot glasses go in to these mint juleps. There's 1. And 2. We're going to mostly, but not quite, fill our glass with crushed ice. Now the next step that Jerry Thomas has us doing is drawing the mint stems out and putting them stem downwards into the glass. Now this could be completely operator error on my part, but I have not figured out how to draw these out and not have them just be a limp mess and just generally not doing their job as a garnish. So I'm going to draw them out, and I'm just going to take 3 fresh sprigs of mint. Agitate them a little bit in my hands, get that scent to release. The garden's full of mint, so we're not going to be lacking. Plant those fresh ones down in there. This one, it's going to wind up looking like a fruit salad. We take a couple of finely sliced pieces of orange, arrange those in there. He says a couple of berries. Doesn't matter what kind, we're going to use blackberries. Okay. Dash with Jamaica rum. And if you saw our Mississippi rum, or our Mississippi punch video, we were using plantation Jamaica rum. This stuff is potent, and a lot of times I'm hesitant to use it in a mixed drink just because it takes over so much. But since it's just a dash, I'm going to see how that real Jamaica character kind of complements this. Then we sprinkle sugar on top. Get our straw, And according to Jerry Thomas, this is a julep fit for an emperor, and it certainly does look it. I've never seen such a well-garnished mint julep in my life. Let's see how we did. It really stacks up. Just using the potent Jamaica rum was a good idea here because it does just kind of complement the flavor of the cognac, which is obviously in there in a far greater amount. The sugar coming from both ends is really neat as it kind of just, the top sugar just kind of drifts into the drink. I would say this is certainly a julep fit for an emperor. So for the next three versions of this, Jerry Thomas has us using the same process, but with a different base spirit than cognac. He also says either to omit the fancy fixings or to omit the fruits and berries. And so our only garnish on these is going to be the mint, more like we think of a mint julep today. It's unclear whether or not he intends for us to continue to dash it with rum, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to see how those spirits perform on their own, and then we'll add the dash of rum and see what the difference is. So first up is the Brandy Julep, and since Jerry Thomas lists this one separately from his main mint julep recipe, I'm going to assume that he is referring to a different sort of brandy than cognac, perhaps even a domestically produced brandy. And as we've seen in other historic cocktail videos, brandy was a major player on the spirit scene in the United States prior to Prohibition, and so naturally for this we are turning once again to spirits of French licks, Old Clifty, Hoosier apple brandy. This is a very rare example of an old style apple brandy that was produced in this region, available on the market today, and if you don't see it in your liquor stores, ask for it. There's nothing else like it. Also, spirits of French Lick, and particularly their master distiller, Alan Bishop, has been very generous to the Locust Grove Distillery project. Another thing I want to mention here is that the idea of a brandy-based mint julep is what launched this whole journey for me. One of my personal passions is just daily life in the United States and England during the 1840s, and so naturally I've spent quite a bit of time with Eliza Acton's work, Private Cooking for Modern Families, which was first published in London in 1845. It predated by a number of years Mrs. Beeton's better known work, and personally I prefer Eliza Acton's work. But she has a recipe in there for a mint julep, which she calls an American receipt, and she said the receipt, which was contributed by an American gentleman, is somewhat vague. Now, at the beginning, she basically says that you can use whatever kind of alcohol you want in it, including even some kinds of wine. But as she got into the recipe, she just started mentioning brandy specifically, which then sent me on a mission to find other documentation of brandy-based mint juleps, which then led to the material for this whole minty, boozy journey that we are going on together. That is really good. As Alan says when he talks about this is kind of this brandy has somewhat more in common with whiskey than other brandies, and it's a little taste of what we had in this region at that time, and that is just really phenomenal. The way it all comes together is almost like we've gone halfway from the cognac julep to the modern mint julep with the bourbon, but not quite. We've got an in-between phase here, and the flavor is just amazing. Now, like I say, we're going to try to just do a little dash of the rum. It was not clear whether Jerry Thomas intended us to or not, so the last one complemented things really well. All right. And it does here too. The important thing, if you're using the plantation rum, like I say, this is a real Jamaican pot distilled rum. The flavor is very potent, so you literally just do want to do a drop in there, so it just kind of complements that flavor from this brandy, and the rum and this particular brandy really do go really well together for a very full-bodied experience. It's something that you just have to try. So That's our Brandy Julep. Let's move on to the next one. The Gin Julep. And for this, we are going to use Ransom Old Tom Gin. Now, David Wondrich, who is the cocktail historian that we've met several times during this series, helped to develop this Old Tom Gin specifically to be like a 19th century Old Tom Gin, so there would actually be something that we could use. As he points out in his work, Imbibe, London Dry Gin, more the gin that we're used to making cocktails out of, did not become the principal import into the United States until the 1890s. And so for 1862 in the United States, this is probably the closest gin available on the market that you're going to get. Oh, wow. I didn't know what to expect from this. Trying to stuff that all down before we add the rum. That's amazing. The botanicals in the gin just really kind of drift through the whole thing and mingle with the mint to create a julep experience that I have never had before. I would not have thought of making gin the base spirit for a mint julep. I don't know how this would go with London Dry Gin. Like I say, that's not what they were dealing with really at that point in the United States. It's this Old Tom Gin. You can find other Old Toms out there. Like I say, this one though, this is formulated specifically to be like they had here in America in the 19th century. So let's try the rum. Just a little bit. It adds a nice body to it, I think. I'll be honest, I was really skeptical about this whole one. Everything seemed unfamiliar to me as far as mint juleps went, but no, this is a winner. There's a lightness and an aromaticness about the gin that then the rum really rounds out with just a lot of nice body. And again, like I say, you just want a little bit. So deciding which one's the best is going to be tough. We've got one more to go. Let's launch into it. Last but certainly not least is the Whiskey Julep. And while Jerry Thomas listed this as a variant on the mint julep, this has every element that we would think of as a mint julep today. And while he does not specifically name bourbon, bourbon was certainly an option in 1862, so how could this lifelong Kentuckian resist? I am going to use my favorite julep bourbon, Old Bardstown White Label, 100 proof, bottled in bond. You can use whatever kind of bourbon you prefer, or if you're feeling adventurous, try another kind of whiskey that was available in 1862 for your Whiskey Julep. And you cannot beat a bourbon-based mint julep. I say that, these have all been wonderful. This is exactly what we think of as a mint julep today. Like I said, it's got all the elements. You know, everybody who makes them has their own process, and so the steps are switched around and things like that. But this recipe from 1862 is certainly you could serve this as a mint julep today, and nobody would, you know, think any different. Let's try a little bit of the rum. It adds something to it. I think it does. I don't know if I'd say I prefer it just because I think this is so close to what I'm used to that it's a little bit different, but I think very similar to the gin. It gives a roundness and a body to it that maybe I wouldn't usually expect. So I would say this is good, and it's definitely worth trying. So that's the last of the main mint julep and the 4 variants, which here ends with what is kind of the end of our story, ultimately what we think of as a mint julep today. Well, I wanted to end this with some kind of verdict, but I really don't have one. Every single one had something special about it to recommend it. Amy is here with us today. She was just too busy to actually get on the video. She's on the other side of the camera. And she... her one cautionary tale was, I know what gin can do, and it should not go down that smooth. But that was a really special one. So, honestly, I can't recommend one over the other. I think you should try them all if you can. If you have a favorite spirit, certainly stick with it. Every one of them had their own unique character that was really wonderful. It was kind of a perfect, this whole thing has been a perfect kind of midway between the earlier Victorian juleps we were trying and the modern mint julep. Here in 1862, even though bourbon is not the standard accepted spirit for a mint julep, it is present, and it is certainly on its way, and over the next several decades you can certainly see how that took over. So thank you very much for joining us with this unique julep episode. I think this is the most drinks we've ever put in one episode, and I'm honestly not sure what we're going to do next. I'm looking for kind of a midway between this and what we started with. So I'm going to keep on working on that, and this will not be the last time we come to you talking about mint juleps. So stay safe out there. Hope you can enjoy some of these, and we will see you next time. Yeah. Wow, guys. That was 4 mint juleps in one video. That's... I guess there's worse ways to spend a day on the job.